Do ad blockers mess with your analytics data? If you're using a client-side tracker like the Mixpanel JavaScript SDK to capture your end users' behaviors, then the answer is yes. Ad blockers are totally messing with your data. But what if I told you that you could solve this problem in less than 5 minutes, completely eliminating ad blockers' interference with your clickstream data? I'm telling you, we can do that. Hi, I'm AK, a tech lead at Mixpanel. Let's talk about ad blockers and analytics. First, we'll demonstrate the problem. Imagine this UI component is part of my application. I really want to understand what features of this widget are being used by my end users. So I include the Mixpanel SDK in my app, and with a few lines of JavaScript, I'm tracking every button, knob, and slider on this widget. I can see the data flowing to Mixpanel. So far, so good. When I go to test my app in a normal browser, though, I notice that none of my click or view events are being sent. What gives? As it turns out, I have an ad blocker installed, and because Mixpanel is a well-known tracker, this ad blocker is having a blast breaking our tracking. None of the clicks or views inside of this browser are sending events to Mixpanel. This is a problem because over 40% of end users worldwide employ some kind of ad blocking browser extension. If you have a tech-savvy user base, that percentage is probably higher. So let's talk about ad blockers. At a high level, ad blockers are like Cookie Monster. They love to eat cookies, and they will eat anything that looks like a cookie, even if it actually isn't a cookie. More correctly, ad blockers keep an up-to-date list of URLs which are known as advertising, tracking, or pop-up generating services. When you install an ad blocker on your browser, every time your browser makes a request, for example to api.mixpanel.com, the ad blocker checks to see if this URL is on the list. If it matches the ad blocker's blacklist, Cookie Monster swallows up the request and it never reaches its destination. And you don't get to see what your end users are doing in your app. You can actually watch this happen live. Just navigate to a website with Mixpanel or any other well-known tracker installed and open up the developer tools in your browser. You can see that this request for the Mixpanel SDK was blocked, and it was blocked by my ad blocker. The Cookie Monster ate it. And this is what breaks our tracking. Luckily, the solution to this problem is simple. We need a proxy server between our app's tracking code and Mixpanel's API. The proxy is like a secret agent, seamlessly facilitating communication between your app and Mixpanel without raising any of the ad blocker's alarms. It's very easy to create a proxy server, which does exactly this. We've even written a ready-to-go template just for you. In the video description, you'll find a link to a GitHub repository called Tracking Proxy. This is a batteries-included Nginx proxy wrapped in a Docker container, ready to deploy. In the repo, you'll find some one-click deploy options for various cloud providers. And if you prefer the manual way, we have instructions for that too. It's always a good idea to review the source code before deploying someone else's container. So let's take a look at what this package is doing under the hood. Because it's a Docker deployment, we can start by reading the Docker file in the repo. Whoa, it's only 2 lines. The from Nginx line means that this service should install Nginx, a well-known open source application for creating servers, load balancers, and all sorts of infrastructure for the web. The next line is copying our Mixpanel specific configuration for Nginx into the place where Nginx expects it to be. So let's take a quick look at the Nginx configuration file, which is also in the repo, so we're clear on what it's doing. Don't be alarmed, this code is pretty simple. Let me explain. The first few lines tell Nginx to create a web server, listening on port 80, that can accept a queue of up to 16,000 connections at once. That's a lot of connections. The next section tells Nginx where to route requests that are made to it. Requests with the lib.min.js and lib.js file extension will be routed to cdn.mixpanel.com. The same request we saw get blocked by our ad blocker earlier. In the final section here, we route all other requests, indicated by the bare / to api.mixpanel.com, which catches all of Mixpanel's ingestion endpoints, like /track for events or /engage for user profiles. And it also makes sure to forward the end user's IP address, so Mixpanel's geolocation works as intended. Pretty simple, right? All right, enough code. Let's use one of these one-click deploy scripts and stop worrying about ad blockers once and for all. I'm going to use Google Cloud because I'm feeling lucky today. So I'll click the Run on Google Cloud button and I'll be taken to my Google Cloud console in my GCP account. We've already audited the source code, so I'm going to trust the repository and hit confirm. You might be asked a few questions about which GCP project and which GCP region you'd like to deploy this service in, so I'll choose a project and region appropriate for my application. Google Cloud is now fetching the source code from GitHub and deploying the container as a Cloud Run service in my GCP project. When it's done, I get a unique HTTPS-enabled URL that points to my new proxy service. I'll copy that value onto the clipboard, as we'll need it later. And just to demonstrate what we've done, let me paste this URL into a new browser tab. Interesting, right? A message from Mixpanel. Consequently, this is the same message that I would see if I just went to api.mixpanel.com. If we think about it, this makes sense. My proxy is pointing to api.mixpanel.com, so my browser gets the same response from either endpoint. This is exactly what we want, and we're almost done. The final step is to tell the Mixpanel SDK to route its requests through my proxy, rather than hitting api.mixpanel.com directly. Luckily, this is also very simple to do. Back in my application source code, I need to add an option to Mixpanel's initialization step. So I go to where mixpanel.init is called in my code, locate the second argument, which is a list of options, and add a simple key value pair. The key is API_host, and the value is the URL of my proxy server. Just like that. There's just one more quick step. If I included Mixpanel in my app with the HTML snippet, rather than as a build time dependency with npm or yarn, I need to tell the snippet to fetch the Mixpanel library via my proxy service as well. We can use a simple global variable here called mixpanel_custom_lib_URL, which resolves to my proxy endpoint. We'll want to put this code before the HTML snippet. So I'll add a line of code here, which implements that by including a string that points to our proxy and adds the lib.min.js suffix. We're done. No more ad blocker headaches. Let's go prove it. So I'll save my changes, restart my server, and head back to my app. When I refresh the page, notice that I still have my ad blocker on, but it doesn't detect Mixpanel. Let's pop open the developer console and click some buttons. All my events are getting sent, and all of the requests are going through my proxy server before being forwarded to Mixpanel. That means that even though I have an ad blocker here, Mixpanel is still receiving events at full fidelity, and I can tell everyone on my team that ad blockers are no longer a problem for our analytics data. You just made a real impact on the quality of your client-side track data for the entire organization. Nice work. If you wish to load test your proxy to prove it can handle the traffic volume which your app requires, there's a link in the README to another repo that has an artillery recipe to hammer your proxy with tracking requests that simulate how it will be used in production. Here are the results of a load test I ran, which is simulating about 6,000 users sending over 100,000 events within a single minute. The proxy handles it perfectly. No reported errors and less than 20 milliseconds of latency compared to the implementation without a proxy. Using these very same figures plugged into the GCP pricing calculator for Cloud Run and spreading the numbers out over a month reveals that the estimated cost of this service is less than $20 a month. And that assumes you have 6,000 users online every second of that month. For the vast majority of use cases, you'll be well within the free tier. These metrics give us confidence that our proxy service scales to meet demand and is cheap enough to be worth it. Don't lose data just because ad blockers wreak havoc on your site. Stand up a proxy, configure Mixpanel to talk to it, and let all the data points flow. Thanks for watching.